Jonathan Antoine became famous at just 17 years old when he appeared on Britain's Got Talent in 2012, stunning everyone with his incredible voice. But his life before the spotlight was filled with pain, struggles, and a deep secret that took 28 years to reveal. Jonathan was born on January 13, 1995, in Chigwell, Essex. From the outside, it seemed like a peaceful place to grow up, but for Jonathan, it wasn't easy. At a very young age, he began to show signs of rare musical talent. By the time he was 6, he had perfect pitch, a rare skill that only a small number of people in the world have. But instead of being celebrated for his talent, he was bullied constantly at school. Children threw food at him and called him horrible names. Teachers would often find him crying alone. To cope, he would hum or quietly create music in his head. His mother, Julie, later shared that he often used music to calm himself during the worst times. Even though he started showing signs of depression by age 8, he was also doing something most people couldn't understand. He could remember every note of an opera after hearing it just once. Doctors would later say he had a rare condition called musical savant syndrome, found in fewer than 1 in 1,000 people. Jonathan also struggled with his weight from a very young age. At just 4 years old, he had already begun eating for emotional comfort. By 5, he was 40 pounds overweight. By age 6, he weighed 95 pounds, twice the normal weight for a child his age. By 10, he weighed 154 pounds. His mother tried everything to help him, including putting their house up for mortgage twice to pay for therapy. But nothing worked. Later, experts diagnosed him with trauma-induced hyperphagia, a condition caused by bullying that affects only a small percentage of children and leads to extreme overeating. His talent was finally noticed when he was 10 years old. A substitute music teacher named Mrs. Williams held a choir audition. Jonathan tried to stay hidden, but once he started singing, everything changed. His voice was powerful and mature, sounding like a grown opera singer. Mrs. Williams said it reminded her of Pavarotti trapped in a child's body. He could sing with a vibrato, a natural wave in the voice, something that usually takes decades to master. Soon, he was performing solos for adults and didn't even need a microphone because his voice was so strong. At 15, he entered the Stratford and East London Music Festival. He was much heavier than the other contestants and shorter in height, but his voice left the audience speechless. He sang Nessun Dorma, and the crowd gave him a 4-minute standing ovation. One of the judges gave him the highest score in the festival's history, 98 out of 100. He not only won money and recording opportunities, but for the first time, he felt accepted. That same year, he was accepted into the Royal Academy of Music's junior program. Out of nearly 3,000 applicants, only 23 were chosen, and Jonathan was one of them. His voice sounded like that of a fully trained adult. The school even waived his £8,000 tuition after learning about his family's financial struggles. His weekends were filled with serious training, singing techniques, music theory, and performance coaching. Other students didn't accept him right away because of how he looked, but soon, he earned their respect. Within 3 months, he was chosen to play the lead role in The Magic Flute, becoming the youngest to ever do so in the school's history. Everything began to shift even more in 2011, when his high school music teacher, Jenny Ewington, made a decision that changed his life. She paired Jonathan with a confident 16-year-old girl named Charlotte Jaconelli. Charlotte loved being on stage and had been performing in musicals since she was 8. Jonathan, on the other hand, was shy and anxious, often hiding in the bathroom before performances. But their teacher believed their voices would blend perfectly, and she was right. Their first duet, The Prayer, was performed in front of just a few students, but the moment was powerful. Their voices together created something unique. Jonathan's tenor voice and Charlotte's soprano combined in a way that amazed everyone who heard them. A music producer who listened to one of their early recordings said it was a once-in-a-generation match. Even though they were complete opposites, Jonathan shy and reserved, Charlotte outgoing and full of energy, they worked well together. Charlotte helped Jonathan get through his panic attacks and stage fear. She would find him, calm him down, and bring him back to rehearsals. Between February and April 2012, they performed 23 times at churches, weddings, pubs, and care homes. Their first paid job was at a church on Easter Sunday, where they earned £50 each. This was just the beginning of their journey, but even at this stage, Jonathan's life was already an incredible story of talent, pain, and courage. Behind the powerful voice was a boy who had suffered deeply, but never gave up. The big turning point came at a charity dinner at the Epping Forest Country Club, where Jonathan and Charlotte performed in front of 200 people. Their duet received a standing ovation that lasted 5 full minutes. After the performance, talent scouts approached them with serious interest. By April, the pair were earning £300 per show, and more than 40 venues were waiting to book them. Their song list had grown to include 15 pieces, but the prayer remained at the center of every performance. These small shows were helping Jonathan slowly build the confidence he needed for something much bigger. It was Charlotte who first suggested they audition for Britain's Got Talent. She heard about the auditions in March 2012 and encouraged Jonathan to give it a try. But he refused at first, afraid that people would mock his appearance on national TV. Charlotte didn't give up. For 3 weeks, she kept asking him to join her. Finally, with only 13 minutes left before the application deadline, she submitted their audition tape. They filmed the video in her bedroom. Jonathan barely appeared on camera and looked very nervous. When the producers called, they were only interested in Charlotte. But she insisted, it was both of them or none. The producers agreed to let them audition as a duo. Their audition was scheduled for April 28 at the London Palladium. Jonathan had never even taken public transport by himself before, so Charlotte stayed at his house the night before to make sure he wouldn't back out. When Jonathan stepped onto the Britain's Got Talent stage, he was just 17 years old. He wore a simple t-shirt, had messy hair, and looked nothing like the kind of contestant who typically impressed the judges. Before he even sang a note, Simon Cowell made a cruel comment to fellow judge Carmen Electra, "Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse." The moment was caught on camera, and it was based entirely on Jonathan's appearance. But Jonathan wasn't shocked. He expected it. He later said, "I don't look like a standard performer. I just went out there in my normal clothes." Then they began to sing The Prayer, a powerful duet made famous by Andrea Bocelli and Celine Dion. Jonathan didn't even pick the song himself. It was suggested by his music teacher, who had asked them to perform it at her wedding. As soon as they began singing, the mood in the room completely changed. The audience quickly stood up, some people cried, and even Simon Cowell's expression changed. All 4 judges gave them a yes. It was more than just a good performance. It was a life-changing moment. Simon, who had mocked Jonathan only minutes earlier, now compared him to the great opera singer Luciano Pavarotti. He told Jonathan, "You're a future star." Experts who reviewed the performance agreed. They said Jonathan's voice already showed incredible maturity for his age, with a vocal range and control rarely seen in someone so young. The video of the audition was posted online on March 24, 2012, and it quickly went viral. Within just a few weeks, it had over 2.6 million views and became the most watched TV audition in the world at that time. International media picked up the story, and people began comparing Jonathan to Susan Boyle, another contestant who had shocked the world with her talent. Even pastors and religious leaders shared the video, calling it inspiring. Jonathan had gone from being a lonely, bullied teenager to an international star almost overnight. But it hadn't been an easy road. Weighing 280 pounds and having suffered years of bullying, he had become so withdrawn that he once had a breakdown at school. His mother, Tracy, said he used to hide under a large jumper and refused to leave the house. So when he walked onto that stage, it wasn't just a performance, it was a personal victory. Even during the semi-finals, the pressure was intense. Jonathan had to use special breathing exercises to manage his anxiety. Charlotte, too, was nervous. Just before one performance, Jonathan had to sit down and calm himself so he wouldn't freeze on stage. But when they sang Caruso, the audience loved them once again. Simon Cowell even admitted that they were his favorite act in the entire competition. But then controversy hit. Simon told Jonathan he should ditch Charlotte and go solo. Many people were shocked. Jonathan didn't even think twice. He said firmly, "We've come on here as a duo, and we're going to stay here as a duo." That moment won him even more admiration and respect from fans. In the final round, many people thought Jonathan and Charlotte would win. But in a surprise twist, the top prize went to Ashley Butler and her dog Pudsey, who won 39% of the public vote. Jonathan and Charlotte came second with 25.8%. Their fans were devastated. Many felt that the outcome had more to do with popularity than true talent. Still, Simon Cowell didn't waste time. The day after the show ended, he signed Jonathan and Charlotte to a record deal worth £1 million. Their first album, Together, was released that September and quickly reached the top 10 on the UK albums chart. Simon carefully planned the album's release to match the live shows of the X Factor, giving them maximum exposure. Jonathan's story had gone from sadness and rejection to fame and recognition, but his journey was only beginning. Jonathan knew they needed to act quickly while people still remembered their powerful performance. He couldn't believe what was happening and said, "I'm still pinching myself that we're actually making our own CD." Their debut album included the songs that made them famous, like The Prayer and Caruso, and it went on to sell over 250,000 copies. Simon Cowell had promised the album would be amazing, and he was right. Fans loved it, and the music showcased the beauty of their voices together. About a year later, Jonathan and Charlotte released a second album called Perhaps Love on October 14, 2013. Just like their first one, it was a hit and reached number 5 on the UK charts. But this new album was different. It had more modern styles, not just classical music. That change was the first sign of a growing problem between the two of them. Jonathan and Charlotte were starting to move in different directions when it came to their music. Jonathan loved classical opera and had been training in it for years. He had even been named Young Musician of the Year at a regional festival in 2010. Charlotte, however, came from a musical theatre background and preferred more modern, theatrical styles. Even though the second album was successful, things behind the scenes were becoming difficult. They didn't agree on what kinds of songs to perform, and tensions started to build. By early 2014, they decided to separate and pursue solo careers. Publicly, they stayed positive. They released a joint statement saying they were excited to return to the recording studio. But behind the scenes, there had been months of disagreements and pressure. Touring had also taken a toll on Jonathan, who had always struggled with his weight and self-esteem. His mother said that before Britain's Got Talent, he wouldn't even leave the house. The constant pressure of interviews, concerts, and media appearances made things worse. Jonathan started experiencing anxiety attacks and became overwhelmed. During their time as a duo, Jonathan and Charlotte sold more than 250,000 albums. Their debut album Together had reached number 5 on the UK charts. So when fans found out in February 2014 that they were splitting up, it came as a big surprise. The announcement was made online, and it shocked many people. But there was more to the story. Sony had made a rare offer. They would give both Jonathan and Charlotte solo recording contracts at the same time. This kind of deal almost never happens, and it showed how much potential both singers had. Charlotte's solo album was set to be released in June, and Jonathan's would come out in October. They had met back in high school in 2006 and shared an incredible journey together, but it was clear that they were now on separate paths. The breaking point came during a meeting with Sony to discuss their third album. Charlotte later revealed that they couldn't agree on anything. Not the music, not the direction, not even the overall style. Jonathan wanted to focus on classical opera, while Charlotte preferred musical theatre. Their visions were just too different. Sony eventually suggested that they go solo. A month later, they made the decision to go their separate ways. Charlotte moved quickly with her solo career. In July 2014, she released her first solo album Solitaire. And by February 2015, she had already made her professional theatre debut in London's Landor Theatre. She played the lead role of Amalia Balash in the Broadway musical She Loves Me, which ran from February 4 to March 7. This was a major step for Charlotte, not just as a singer, but as a performer. She was finally doing what she truly loved, singing and acting live on stage every night. Jonathan's journey was much different. He didn't dive into his solo career with the same confidence. At only 19 years old, he wasn't sure if he could perform on his own. Throughout their time as a duo, Charlotte had always been the one who brought energy and confidence to the stage. She had been his support. Now he had to stand on his own and find that strength within himself. Even though their partnership had ended, their time together had left a huge impact. They had sold more than 200,000 albums around the world and even reached the top 10 on the Billboard classical crossover charts. Their story wasn't just about music, it was about overcoming fear, finding courage, and learning to follow their own paths. The pressure after Jonathan and Charlotte split up was overwhelming. Expectations were incredibly high, and Jonathan needed time to step back. He focused on training, recovering, and trying to reconnect with the love he had for music. Fans didn't take the news of their split well. Many were upset and confused, and headlines were cruel. One even said, "She dumps him." People had fallen in love with them as a duo and didn't want to see them part ways. Some in the music industry supported their solo deals, thinking it was a bold move. But others believed it was too early, especially since their second album Perhaps Love had just been released in the US in October 2013. To many, it felt like their story was only beginning. Still, Jonathan wasn't ready to give up. In October 2014, he released his first solo album, Tenore, which included 12 classical opera tracks. It was serious music, and it made a big impact. The album reached #1 on the official classical artist album chart, and at just 19 years old, Jonathan became the youngest tenor to top that list. Even more impressive, Tenore climbed to #13 on the UK pop chart, showing that he could succeed not just in classical music, but in the wider music world as well. One of the most unforgettable moments that year was when legendary opera singer Placido Domingo invited Jonathan to perform as his special guest at the iTunes Festival in London. It was a moment of honor and showed that Jonathan had truly earned the respect of the classical music community. By 2020, Jonathan took on his most ambitious project, a full concept album called Going the Distance, released on June 5th. It took 3 years to finish and was a collaboration with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, produced by Grammy winner Greg Field. This wasn't just an album, it told a personal story in 3 parts inspired by Jonathan's own journey. For the first time, he performed Nessun Dorma, the iconic aria made famous by Luciano Pavarotti. To top it all off, PBS aired a special concert of Jonathan performing with a full orchestra and choir. By 25, he had become the artist many had hoped he would become. Then, in 2024, Jonathan surprised everyone again with a new project. By request, the Diane Warren Songbook Volume 1. It featured 8 songs and ran just 33 minutes, but it was a major collaboration with legendary songwriter Diane Warren, who had written for stars like Celine Dion, Aerosmith, and Lady Gaga. Now she had worked with Jonathan too. Looking back, it's hard to believe that when Jonathan Antoine first stepped onto the stage of Britain's Got Talent in 2012, he was just a shy 17-year-old, nervous and unsure of himself. He didn't look or act like a typical performer, but his voice stunned the world. That one performance changed everything. Still, behind the powerful voice was a young man quietly carrying deep confusion and emotional pain. It would take over 10 years before he fully understood what had been happening inside him. In early 2023, during an interview in Australia, Jonathan shared something very personal. Something he had never said publicly before. He had been diagnosed with autism. The diagnosis came shortly after his 27th birthday in late 2022. For Jonathan, it felt surreal. For his family and close friends, it was a total surprise. No one had ever suspected it, not during his rise to fame, not after 5 albums, and not even as he traveled the world performing. But suddenly, the diagnosis made everything make sense. All the anxiety, the emotional struggles, the overwhelming reactions to social situations. It finally had a name. It wasn't an excuse. It was a moment of clarity. That same year, Jonathan wrote a heartfelt message on Instagram for World Autism Awareness Day. He shared how the diagnosis had changed how he saw himself. He admitted it was scary, but also freeing. For 28 years, he had been dealing with emotions that felt too intense, stress that never seemed to end, and exhaustion after interviews or public appearances. He now knew that he had been living with undiagnosed autism all that time. The response to his honesty was huge. During the interview, Jonathan's voice shook as he admitted it was his first time talking about autism in public. He explained how not knowing had made life feel harder and lonelier. He described it as spending 28 years in the dark. The spotlight may have shone on him, but behind the scenes, the pain never left. Jonathan had been bullied for his weight since he was 4 years old. After his appearance on BGT, the fame came quickly, but so did the criticism. He often felt misunderstood. Now looking back, he realized many of his emotional and social struggles were connected to autism, something no one had recognized at the time. But Jonathan didn't dwell in regret. Instead, he used his story to help others. He started speaking out about mental health and neurodiversity. He supported campaigns like Classic FM's Make Some Noise and became a patron for pediatric brain tumor research. On social media, he explained what living with autism felt like, not just in vague terms, but with real, relatable details. He wanted to make sure other people who felt like him knew they weren't alone. At the same time that he was coming to terms with his autism diagnosis, Jonathan was also transforming physically. He had struggled with his weight all his life. When he first appeared on Britain's Got Talent, he weighed about 280 pounds. But over the years, he made major changes, not just for his appearance, but for his health and his future. His journey, both inside and out, had been long and difficult. But through it all, Jonathan Antoine proved that even in the face of pain, pressure, and misunderstanding, it's possible to find your voice, and use it to inspire others. In 2013, Jonathan joined Weight Watchers and made a huge change in his life. In just 4 months, he lost over 50 pounds. Eventually, he lost a total of 5 stone, around 70 pounds, and managed to keep the weight off. His transformation was so big that some fans didn't even recognize him in photos. But for Jonathan, it wasn't just about how he looked. It was about feeling healthier, stronger, and more in control of his life. One major reason he had struggled with losing weight before was a thyroid condition that had gone undiagnosed for years. Once doctors discovered the problem, everything started to make sense. He finally understood why it had always been so hard for him to shed weight, even when he tried his best. Treating the thyroid issue gave him the push he needed. After that, he built a daily routine that helped him stay focused. Starting on January 12th, he committed to walking 10,000 steps every day. Since then, he has only missed 2 days. No matter where he was or what his schedule looked like, he found a way to hit his goal, even if it meant pacing in place. For him, walking became more than exercise. It gave him a sense of purpose, cleared his mind, and helped him stay grounded. Some days, walking was the one thing that made him feel in control. Later he said, "I feel stronger and healthier than I have in 10 years. That meant he hadn't felt this good since the early days of his career. Even though he still has more goals to reach, he's facing the future with more clarity, more strength, and a sense of peace. Improving his physical health also helped him mentally. It wasn't just about numbers on a scale, it was about fighting back after years of feeling stuck. During this personal journey, Jonathan found love in a completely unexpected way. He met Michelle Ducey, a waitress from Canada, through an online chat service. Their relationship began during a difficult time, just after he and Charlotte Jaconelli had gone their separate ways as a singing duo. Jonathan was trying to figure out who he was as a solo artist, and Michelle brought support, comfort, and encouragement when he needed it most. She quickly became his muse and helped rebuild his confidence. She even inspired his album Belief, and Jonathan openly called her the light of his life.